Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Well, Mama don't allow no modern houses going on. Mama don't allow no modern houses going on. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna love my modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no modern houses going on.
Welcome to US Modernist Radio. Join George Smart and Frank King as they talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. Today, US Modernist Radio welcomes architect Greg Dykers of Snøhetta, one of the top design firms in the world, and librarian Greg Raschke of North Carolina State University. And now, the host of the podcast, even Bill Cosby advised against starting, George Smart and Frank King.
Hey, thank you, Tom, and welcome to the show. As you know, we give away prizes here on US Modernist Radio, but you have to enter to win. And our entry method is very mid-century. It's the postcard. Remember those?
Yes.
You write an address, put on a stamp, and then take them to an ancient temple called the post office. So you can write us at US Modernist Radio in care of Soundtracks, 302 Jefferson Street, Suite 160, Raleigh, North Carolina, 27605. We'd love to hear from you. And we have a prize to be given away today. We have a copy of a great little book put out by North Carolina State University Libraries called Chair Hunt. And this is about the amazing chairs that you can find in the James Hunt Library, which we'll be talking about today. This is an autographed copy by the author, Gwen Wood Emery. And let's look in our mod box to see who has written in from the hundreds of cards and letters that we have in my hand. Let's see. Let's start out with our runners-up. These runners-up received no prizes, but just the agony of having lost. First one, Lisa Raschke. Never heard of her. Next, Julie Eldridge. Sorry, Julie. You did not win today. And our winner of the book is Leslie Samet of Raleigh, North Carolina. She wrote a card, and she wrote, pick me, pick me, pick me. I want to win. I heart swag, pick me. Okay, for the exuberance alone.
Eloquence.
Leslie, you have won the Chair Hunt book, and we will get that to you. Support for US Modernist Radio comes from Greg Kelly of Modbox USA and Sarah Sonk of Moho Realty. ModboxUSA.com. Your mail would feel so much more special, I guess, being inside a Modbox with one of Modbox USA's colorful mid-century modern mailboxes that complements your home's modern aesthetic and turns mail time into party time. See one now and their new wall-mounted edition at modboxusa.com. And by Sarah Sonk of Moho Realty. She's a real estate agent who gets it. She loves the modernist houses you love. She cares about design and legacy, and she brings expertise, experience, and track record to close your deal. www.mohorealty.com or 919-601-7339. And now here's Frank with the news.
Alrighty, headline, architect tries to get out of lawsuit because he's not really an architect. You can't sue me for being a bad architect because he says I'm not an architect at all.
Never mind.
Clever defense. That's the nervy claim a Manhattan man made when he was accused of ripping off a billionaire motel mogul and his yoga instructor wife for $140 large in bogus costs tied to the botched renovation of their Bahamian vacation home. I'm trying to work up a little sympathy for anybody with a Bahamian vacation home. The Silvermans say the guy charged him $28,000 for skylights he never ordered, pocketed $37,000 earmarked for vendors, and took $80,000 purportedly for audio-visual equipment. All righty, one more will make a trend as the news of the terrifying glass-bottom swimming pool elevated between two towers in London has been followed by the news of a remarkably similar, equally terrifying glass-bottom pool bridge in India. This one might actually be even more terrifying since it's 12 stories off the ground instead of 10. And, wait, there's more. It also projects out from one side of the building slightly. The good news is, if you fall out the other side, there's always a slim chance you'll land in the normal in-ground pool below.
No.
Cannonball! The best news is, given the average water quality in India, generally several shades darker than Dick Cheney's soul, swimmers won't be able to see the bottom of the pool, much less the traffic 12 stories below. And now in a bit of sad news, as we approach the end of 2015, I must tell you that it's been a tough year on the world of charmingly tacky home decorations. In May, the inventor of the heart-shaped hot tub passed away after circling the drain for quite some time.
Oh.
The inventor?
Inventor of the heart-shaped hot tub. And in June, the creator of the pink plastic lawn flamingo died at age 79, and like his greatest creation, is now inserted into the ground. Wait, there's one more. The good news is the inventor of the concrete lawn fawn, also known as concrete Bambi and ubiquitous in the rural South, Daryl Kicklighter, has yet to join the, wait for it, dearly departed. I know. Use a pun, go to jail. It's the law. And that's the Modernist News.
Thank you, Frank. Our guests today know each other really well. They worked together to build one of the finest libraries in America, the 2013 James B. Hunt Jr. Library in Raleigh, North Carolina, an award-winning multi-use building that has been featured recently on PBS's Cool Spaces show. Architect Greg Dykers, at just 28 years old, received international acclaim after winning a $350 million commission for the Library of Alexandria in Egypt in the late 80s, early 90s. He is founder of the design firm Snøhetta, with offices in Oslo, Norway, and New York, as well as other locations around the world. They are architects for some of the most amazing modern buildings to be found. Greg Raschke is Associate Director for Collections and Scholarly Communication at North Carolina State University. He's a great friend of the show and our parent organization, North Carolina Modernist Houses. So let me start out with you, Craig. How did you and NC State come to get to know each other?
Well, it's a bit of a long story, so I'll try and shorten it for you. But interestingly enough, I met the director of the design school in Crete, in the Mediterranean, at a conference many years prior to the library project starting, and we stayed in touch over the years, and eventually the project started to grow, and we were asked to submit a proposal. But it's amazing, from standing on a harbor on the island of Crete to ending up in Raleigh. That's quite a story.
Was that Marvin Malika?
Yes.
We've had him on our show a couple episodes back.
Yeah, he's a wonderful and energetic person, a great teacher and a great thinker, as well as someone who truly promotes great design in our world.
It's fair to say that this building in Raleigh has instantly become one of the icons of the area, if not the whole state. So, Greg, how did NC State end up choosing Snøhetta?
Well, I wasn't heavily involved in the selection process. I was around it, and I got to watch it happen. But there was a competitive charrette process that Marvin, and through his previous contacts with Craig, had invited Snøhetta to participate in. I believe there were 5 finalists selected, and then they had a sort of day-long charrette design process. They made formal presentations, and then there was a vote among the building committee members, and then they were called Pierce, Brinkley, Cease, and Lee were selected as the executive architects, and Snøhetta was selected as the lead designer. And Pierce, Brinkley, Cease, and Lee is now called Clark Nixon, and they're here in Raleigh. And those two got together like peanut butter and jelly. I mean, they just came together and worked really closely. Craig can give you a little more insight. But that's how we came to select the sort of design team for the project. And we couldn't have been more pleased because both firms were sort of ascending, both reputationally and in terms of the projects they were doing. So we sort of caught a wave of momentum at a good time. And Marvin helped design the charrette process, Dean Malika. So that was really helpful for us.
When you walk in the Hunt Library and you see what's there, I mean, this is not your grandfather's library at all. I mean, it's not just a bunch of books and a card catalog and some very helpful people. this is a whole multimedia experience. Tell us what you find when you walk in the building.
Well, the first thing that you find when you walk in the building, you see a yellow staircase, which is a lot of that is Craig's doing. The sort of yellow stairs weave sort of through the building and follow a sort of weave kind of pattern that was a aesthetic for the building. And then you see the BookBot, which is a sort of 2-story high floor-to-ceiling glass installation that looks on our robotic retrieval system, where the vast majority of the 2 million books that are in the building are stored.
Wow.
Yeah, and they have 4 robots that kind of run down aisles and deliver bins. And then you see some interactive screens that you can engage with and connect with as you move up, and then you move up into the building.
You know, it's funny. I could say that you mentioned that it's not your grandparents' library. That's true, but you could say that it might be your great-great-great-grandparents' library, because the building is modeled around the great ancient libraries of the past, the stoas that the ancient Greeks used to better understand the thoughts of their companions and colleagues. These were very lively places with a great deal of social intercourse and interaction amongst a wide range groups of people. And the Hunt Library is a part of that tradition. So while it may not be the library that you saw 30 years ago, it might be the same kind of library you would have seen 2,000 years ago.
And there's other things in the building too, Greg, like...
Yeah, there's a teaching and visualization lab, which is a 270-degree immersive environment where faculty and students can look at data, large-scale visualizations. They can immerse themselves in 17th century London through a research project that a faculty member is engaged with. They can look at geospatial information in large scale. There are immersive screens, sort of display screens, art walls, curved environments. There's a game lab, which was designed in conjunction with the Digital Games Research Center, which is primarily a classroom during the day and then is sort of a social space later on. It's been used for things like virtual crime scenes to create crime scenes for students to study and educate. So there are 3D printers, there are laser cutters. A couple of the themes in the building, like Craig mentioned, the discourse, the interactions between people, a collaborative environment where people are sort of teaching each other, engaging each other. And then creativity is a major theme. And you see that sort of turn of libraries from being places where you might read and consume information, which you absolutely do in this building, but you also create, you explore ideas, you create things, you collaborate, you iterate on your ideas, and you sort of come together around that creative process, which is a real major theme, I think, for the building.
And besides books, I mean, you can check out all manner of equipment, right?
You can, and this is sort of something that our library's been doing for over a decade now, and the NCSU Libraries has always sort of considered itself a leading-edge competitive advantage for the university. So part of that is making the latest technologies available for people. And some of those aren't so latest, things like laptops, which are just sort of productivity for students. But you can get digital cameras, you can do multimedia projects, you can get Google Glass when it came out, you can get Kindles, you can check out iPads, things like that are both productive but also at the sort of leading edge to expose students and faculty to kind of the latest technologies and let them sort of explore them.
So there's an interesting comment I have about that, and when I talk to people about libraries, especially those that are people who love libraries, they often love books, and I'm that way too. I've been working with libraries for nearly 30 years, and my private book collection is substantial, and I do indeed love books. And of course, books are a central part of a library. But a book, we mustn't forget, is just another type of technology. Before there were books, there were still libraries, and before there were papyrus rolls, there were still libraries. So today, when we look at a library, we don't have to see the computer as replacing the book, but simply as augmenting the book. And we'll see in the future that the computers that we use today will be phased out and a new type of technology will come in. But we'll always be interacting with different types of technology in a library. But the key factor is that any technology, whether it's a book or a computer, is a useless piece of nothing if people don't use it. So it takes people to make these technologies live. And that's what we're trying to create at the Hunt Library, a place where technologies and people work together rather than sort of sitting in a storeroom or creating sort of quiet, not quiet, I would say, less used pieces of a building. We have quiet spaces in the library, but we also have active spaces, and that creates a sort of diversity of choice.
Yeah, that diversity is a very important theme that we tried to create, and Craig knows that very well and helped us quite a bit. I mean, there's a reading room which is sort of probably reflects a lot of people's classic view of a large reading room. It's this wooden-lined reading room surrounded by books and things like that. So there are those sort of classic quiet spaces, and then there are those collaborative spaces, technology-rich spaces. The idea is to have a lot of diversity.
Hey, Greg.
Yes, sir.
Speaking of working together, if you're in charge of scholarly communication there at the North Carolina State, who do I get down and unscholarly with at North Carolina State?
We only do scholarly.
Well, they are bringing potential athletic recruits through the library now, which I find quite fascinating, that the athletic portion of academia is connecting to the library as an interesting and inviting place. So you're finding a lot of different types of people in this library that you might not have seen in libraries past.
Yeah, I think that's one of our proudest moments is the athletic director, Debbie Yao, had the coaches come there for a meeting, and I think it sort of blew away their conceptual model of a library, as you mentioned earlier, George. And now they bring all the athletic recruits through the Hunt Library as one of the sort of signature spaces on the building. And we get a lot of the student tours come through there. Faculty that we're trying to recruit will come through the building because space has such an important impact on people's sort of reflection of what an organization is and what a university is. And the Hunt Library is that sort of signature place, one of them. And now we've got the Tally Student Center and other things. But the Hunt Library really stands out as a signature piece for the building, and the campus community has really responded to it, which has been wonderful.
We've been working on a similar idea on a few other projects. So if you want to talk about unsavory or unscholarly things that happen, a new library that we've just made in Toronto, we made a space in it where the goal was anything could happen. And we found out after it opened that, well, actually anything is happening. So that's a little hard to control. But people are showing up in bathing suits with beach balls, and, there's a lot of kissing going on in the corners and who knows what. So, it's been a little challenging to manage.
Those Canadians.
Craig, when I stayed awake in 10th grade and learned about the original Library of Alexandria, which was the seat of knowledge for the ancient world, I knew it had gotten destroyed, I think, a couple of times by various invaders who came through. And you were involved in its most recent resuscitation in 1989. Tell us about that project. And also, I noticed it was pretty expensive. So how do you spend $350 million on a library in Egypt?
Well, actually, if you look at it in terms of other national libraries of a similar size that were built at that time, it was about half the cost.
Okay.
Of, for example, the French National Library, the British National Library, and it was also built faster than either of those two in an environment that wasn't used to building modern or contemporary architecture. It actually was a quite intense process. I worked every day on it for probably 7 days a week most of those years. It took 13 years to complete, which again sounds like a long time, but the British National Library took about 30 years to complete. And we were hindered by the tragic events at of September 11th in 2001 that created some challenges for the opening process. But in any case, the notion of this great library is such a profound component of our myth of the ancient world, or our clear and classical or historical understanding of the ancient world, that it seems everyone has an inkling of what the Great Library of Alexandria once was. So the challenge as an architect was to try and make a building that would somehow allow for every individual's understanding of that institution to come forward, even if people's understandings are different. So we created a building that was a canvas, a backdrop for people to project their ideas onto, and this would build a sense of ownership in creating the new Alexandria Library. It feels at times like a Pharaonic building, even though the ancient Library of Alexandria was not Pharaonic. It occurred during the Hellenistic period. At times it feels Hellenistic, and at times it feels Arabic, and at times it feels European. but ultimately it should feel an ambassador of the world's knowledge, where we see much of our thinking today can be brought back to this great period of Western history of the Mediterranean region.
Well, and while we're on the topic of buildings opening, the Oslo Opera House opened, and apparently one couple celebrated a little more than everyone else.
Yeah, when we had the opening day for the National Opera in Oslo, we had kings and queens and presidents and premiers come for the opening night's events. And designing a theater and an opera and a ballet is quite difficult. And so one is curious to see how the critics will receive the building after it opens. So we were quite excited to find out what the first headline would say. And when we opened up the newspapers, it said that there was a couple caught making love on the roof of the opera during the opening night festivities. So just over our heads, there was a couple consummating the building for us, and they were caught and asked to complete their exercises elsewhere. So,
so the lady didn't sing. So while we're on the subject, and before I forget, how do you handle people having sex in the library? Because I am told this is actually a real thing, and I guess it kind of makes sense because it's quiet, and oftentimes during the day there aren't that many people wandering about.
Well, I guess you have to clarify whether you're talking about the librarians having sex or the customers having sex.
Whoa!
No, we're very professional all the time.
They have a rule in their HR handbook: no sex in the building.
I don't know if it's exactly in there, but I'm sure something to that effect is in there. And we also have a professional ethic, I think. But the Hunt Library, it would actually be quite challenging because of it's so open.
Yeah.
You'll see a lot of elements of signature designs for Snøhetta that I think permeate a lot of what I've seen. But Craig can talk about this more. But lots of natural light, lots of open space, and it's very easy to see what's going on in the building, to see and be seen, which are all very important elements of the style of the building, but it creates less spaces for that kind of activity to happen. So,
I'm not promoting that you should run to the library and have sex. Nevertheless, there is a something interesting about the idea that people feel somehow connected to buildings in different ways than what we're accustomed to. Obviously, there are a number of social norms and taboos that we have to respect in complicated societies, but the fact that somebody maybe goes with their date and holds their hand on the way to get a book is a good thing, or that people feel connected to a place that in such a way that they can be comfortable there. That is a virtue of architecture.
Well, I'm sure you're going to have many stories of couples meeting at the library, and then, have you had any wedding requests yet, Greg?
We have had multiple wedding requests. Yes.
Do you guys do that yet?
We're unable to provide those in a state-appropriated building. But we have had. And it speaks to the response to the building. It's been wonderful. We've had birthday party requests. We had a couple who wanted a gentleman who wanted to have a candlelit dinner on the roof and get engaged with his wife, or I presume hopefully wife now at this point. Wedding requests, birthday party requests, lots of photographers who want to do photo shoots and things like that in the building. And it speaks to what Craig, it's a beautiful building, and we're really grateful to have it, and the response has been wonderful. And sometimes people ask for things we can't do, but at least we know they're interested.
Sure.
Which is great.
Craig, tell us what Snøhetta means as a word. What does it refer to?
Well, it's the name of a mountain in central Norway, and you think you've never heard of it, but you probably have, and that's because in the ancient Norse mythologies, Snøhetta was the mountain where Valhalla was located, and nearly everyone has heard of Valhalla, the great palace of the mountain kings and the warriors of the
Wait a second,
Viking
is that
age.
Thor and the hammer?
Yes, this was the palace for the great gods of Norse mythology.
The Avengers, yes, of course.
Yeah, and Valhalla represents a place of courage and a place of meaning, where landscape in the mountain and architecture in the palace come together. So it was a useful and interesting name for us. And we're part Norwegian and part American. So my colleagues, my business partners, many of whom are Norwegian, and we're also Americans.
And your founding partner, is it Kjetil Thorsen?
Yes, that's correct.
Did I pronounce that correctly?
Almost. It's Kjetil Thorsen.
Kjetil Thorsen. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll work on that one. Your firm has done some really amazing work around the world. Besides the Norwegian National Opera and Ballet in Oslo, you've done the National September 11th Memorial Museum Pavilion in New York City, the Ryerson University Student Learning Center in Ontario, the San Francisco Museum of Art Expansion, the Calgary Public Library, working on the Barack Obama Presidential Center in Honolulu, and the Edvard Munch High School brand design.
Yes. And we also won a commission to redesign the national currency of Norway recently. So we're designing a portion of the national currency there, the money. So I'm assuming we'll get paid in the money that we've actually designed. So that'll be an unusual situation.
Well, and two questions on your projects. Number one, Edvard, is it Munch?
Yes, he's a great painter, Munch.
Yeah, the high school. Here's my question. Their sports team, is the mascot the Fighting Screamers?
Well, yeah, I believe it is. And of course it would be soccer. The famous painting by Edvard Munch, of course, The Scream, is so well known by people around the world. So it would be a part of their thinking, yes. We're also designing the reconstruction of Times Square, which has many funny stories related to it. So we're in charge of building new pedestrian plazas on Times Square between 42nd and 47th Street, and we permanently removed automobile traffic off Broadway through Times Square to make more plazas. And if you've been reading newspapers lately, you'll see that there's been a lot of hubbub about the fact that women are showing up topless in Times Square and creating a lot of confusion amongst tourists. It is, in fact, legal in New York City for any gender to go topless. But in Times Square, groups have started using it as a place where they're showing off their wares, and now it's a challenge of how do we manage this type of free speech in a very complex.
They even have a name for them. Something
desnudas, which is they're mostly from Brazil, so I believe that's a Portuguese word. It's one small part of the happenings at Times Square. There are a number of other things happening there, but working on such an intense space that has nearly 43 million visitors a year has been one of our more challenging projects.
I've read that there are 7,000 to 8,000 people crossing a crosswalk in a 2-hour period along 44th, 45th Street?
Yeah, that's correct. At just one crosswalk, and this is a very small crosswalk, probably smaller than most that you would see in Raleigh or in a traditional urban center. It's a very tight crosswalk. So enormous throngs of people. It's just it is really a kind of insight into what it is to be a part of humanity.
And you did something called an anger map to take care of this?
Yeah, that's right. So there's so much trouble traditionally to move through Times Square because of interactions with cars and buses and too many throngs of people in too small of a space. So before we began the project, we looked where people were irritated the most, which was basically the entire area, based on challenges of proximity and other key issues that might create a well-being. And we found out where these most irritating areas were, and that's where we put the focus of the design effort to try and change these areas from irritating to enjoyed.
What do you do to reduce people being pissed off about intersections and crosswalks?
Well, you do a lot of little things. So we use what we call, and is sometimes referred to as nudge theory. So instead of pushing people to do something, we nudge them very gently, a bit like a sheepdog who sort of nudges you on your ankle to get you to move a few inches in one direction or the other without you noticing. So we have little things here and there that allow people to more naturally walk through the space, provide large collection areas for large tour groups to easily gather and get out of the way of the New Yorkers who need to quickly get from the subway station to their doors of their offices. Little things like that, small understandings of the space can have a great effect.
Yeah, one of the best things about the increased security at airports, to me, is that people who are there to meet their friends and family coming off the plane are no longer allowed to congregate right there at the end of the jetway as everybody else is trying to get to their next flight. So that's a brilliant idea. Have a spot off to one side where the tourists can gather while all the commuters can move through quickly.
And another thing is, of course, that people in these kinds of complex conditions can get very confused quickly. So we provide little moments of orientation. And finally, we often say that perhaps one of the most important things on your body, other than your brain, is your butt. So we make lots of places for people to sit down and lean against and just kind of relax or get comfortable so they can orient themselves or talk with their friends. And we sometimes joke that if your butt's happy, then you're happy. And so that changes the red map to green.
Wow, that is a great architectural slogan.
Absolutely.
Right there.
Yes, that's some true new modernist theory. Sometimes, I have to admit, when I heard the name of the Modernist radio show, which is a fantastic name, I sometimes say that the world of modernist architecture is divided into sort of two groups. One I would call the Old World Modernists, and one I would call New World Modernists. Old World Modernists do what appears to be modern architecture, but they do it in the fashion of the Old World masters, with a great author at the top and an army of people below them who have to carry out their vision. And that's an Old World Modernist. A New World Modernist is someone who works in a team, who understands the value of differing points of view and is able to bring those ideas together and create a stronger validation of who we are as a civilization. And that only comes through interaction. And that's where the Hunt Library is valuable to us as a project, because it fosters New World Modernist thinking, which really has only just become a sort of an understanding of where we're going. And so we're not necessarily looking back to modernism, we're looking forward to a new kind of modernism.
Well, clearly, Craig, you've read my notes, because what I want to talk about next is the nature and personality of your firm versus the starchitecture kind of culture that is out there among international firms. Sounds like that's part of the New World Modernism.
I hope so, and I sometimes enjoy the idea that when I meet new people, they will have not heard the name, and they won't even know how to pronounce our name, or have never heard of it before. But if I mention the buildings that we've done, they know them immediately. So I always think that we are in a great situation where people know our buildings before they know our name. And that's different than the way many architects have seen their work in the past, or at least project their work towards the media, where the author has a greater name importance than the things that they build.
And in terms of succession, it's much harder to have a firm continue on after the creator's passing than it is if you have a real team structure.
I don't know. Am I getting old and dying?
Thinking way down the road. Way down the road.
Yeah, but that's true. Snøhetta is an idea. It's not an individual. So hopefully the idea can move forward in time and change and perhaps be something else that we never imagined.
I want to talk about one of your projects that I found on your website. And you should all go to the Snøhetta website, which we'll have links to on our website, to see just project after project after project of stunning beauty. But there's one in particular called, and I'll say this badly, Bjørnafjorden.
Oh, that's this new project, correct.
Yeah. This is situated on the west coast of Norway. Bjørnafjorden is a spectacular natural tunnel that seems to have these features that come above the water level. Tell us more about that. I know people are going to want to look it up.
Well, we have a lot of projects that have to do with the integration of architecture and landscape. So this is one of those projects where we're most interested in trying to merge together ways of seeing place and structures. And in many ways, infrastructure is, of course, a big part of the world around us. So we think of tunnels and highways and bridges just as things that we kind of need, but we don't often see them as extensions of our civilization into the landscape around us. And likewise, a handshake with the landscape that creates the conditions for things like coastline development or boat docks and other things to work. So this is a way in which you're able to cross the fjord without interrupting maritime traffic, boat traffic, in a kind of floating tunnel that is semi-submerged. It's kind of an expansion of the hillside along the fjord. The fjords are quite beautiful in Norway, and it's often joked that God was working overtime when made the landscape there. It's a place where you really have to think carefully about every intervention that's created.
And there's going to be pedestrian or bike traffic there too, which is unusual, at least in America, for tunnels.
Yes, that's correct. So you're able to create a way of passing over the top with these kind of floating islands, which can be docks and other things, as well as moving below in trains and cars. So
on the map, does it connect Bergen to the area south? Is that where it goes across the water?
Yeah, the Bjørnfjorden is Bjørn means bear, so bear fjord, you could say in English, and that's those are the links across this very very famous and well known area on the West Coast.
And you're also working on the Barack Obama Presidential Center structure in Honolulu, which I understand is not the same as a presidential library.
Well, that's a little incorrect. There was a period of time prior to about 2 months ago where many locations were vying for the potential to create the library and presidential center for President Obama. As you know, the president has connections and deep ties in Hawaii as well as Chicago. So at that time, before a choice had been made by the foundation, we were asked by groups in Hawaii to propose a possible presidential center and library there to be considered. Ultimately, Hawaii was not considered the correct choice, and now at this time, Chicago is the choice for the new presidential center. And as you may have read in the news, there's been a new process for designing a building there, and several architects are currently vying for the possibility to build that project in Chicago.
So they haven't chosen that firm yet?
No, and I'm not allowed to talk about it either.
Okay.
The guys in the black suits are standing behind me right now. So.
Okie doke. Greg, at NC State, as the Centennial campus of which the Jim Hunt Library is a part continues to expand and the campus kind of moves itself into the latter part of this century, what kind of role does the library take on campus in terms of this growing IT infrastructure and the fact that we're all running around with devices in our hands every waking moment?
Well, I mean, so there's a number of roles that the library plays on that kind of environment. Number one, I think the role that it established when it was built, which is the heart of the Centennial campus. It's sort of a well-used phrase, but it's really for libraries, but it's really applicable here. It created a social center, an intellectual center, 24/5 space on the campus, which it had really lacked before. Previous to Hunt opening, they didn't have residence halls. And they didn't have sort of evening spaces for people to gather and come together. And the Hunt Libraries really provided that. Since then, they've opened some residence halls for students to live out on campus. So it's really created a more of a vibrancy and a life to the campus. And that role, I think, will continue. The other piece is it is a sort of technological node, so to speak, on the campus. It's got a lot of infrastructure. It's got a lot of capabilities. It's got visualization capabilities, networking infrastructure, things like that aren't ubiquitously available, 3D printing that's available in certain departments but not everywhere, things like that, where people can tap into technologies and try them, work with them. We also have expert librarians. We have librarians who are experts in visualization, data curation, text mining, those kinds of 21st century research skills. So people can come in, use the technology, and get expert help in how to use that technology and apply it to their research and their scholarship to make new discoveries, to learn and teach in new ways. We have a film studies teacher who worked with one of our librarians in the game lab to create interactive narrative assignments for their students. So they're learning to create media and engage media in new and more creative ways. So all those kind of things keep us pushing and evolving and growing on the campus.
And you told me recently about the power going out and something interesting happening there in the building?
There was a cable cut somewhere in Raleigh that cut out internet service. what happened was we had wireless on campus, so we are always busy. We will have hundreds and sometimes over 1,000 students in the building in the evenings. And on this particular night, when they didn't have wireless and cable in their homes or their dorms or whatever, they came to the library in numbers like we'd never seen. Every stairwell was filled.
How many did you have, do you think?
I don't know the full count, but we know that there's these beautiful sort of Roman style stairs that are built as a sort of social greeting connection space that you can sit at for a period of time, which often have handfuls of people kind of sitting on them unless we have an event or something like that. And on this night, every seat on those Roman stairs were filled with people with their laptops in their laps and their devices and working away. So it was as crowded as I've ever seen the building. It's an interesting building because it's on student time. So the busiest times of the day are often in the late afternoon all the way through the evening, and even up to midnight and past midnight are some of the busiest times in the building with students working at all hours.
Greg and the library have been wonderful hosts for North Carolina Modernist House's Architecture movie series this year, which we're really pleased about. And if you do visit the Jim Hunt Library, make sure you try out the ice cream that is right off the lobby. It's made there on campus. It's like nothing you've ever experienced. Very famous in this state, and you can get a chance to get a cone or two as you look around.
It's as fresh as you can get, I think, for ice cream.
From the dairy farm, right?
Yeah, it's from the cows are out, south of Tryon Road, and then it's made there on campus and available in both of our main libraries, the D.H. Hill Library on Hillsborough Street and the Hunt Library on Centennial.
And the flavors are great. It's quite a selection.
Absolutely.
I seem to recall that the barn that we had to hold the cows was value engineered out of the project.
That's right. That's right. The dairy was not available. We weren't able to include that in the project.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you, Craig, for joining us, and Greg for being on the show with us. You guys were great, and we'd love to have you back sometime.
Been a privilege to work in North Carolina. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, and good to talk with you again, Craig.
Bye-bye.
US Modernist Radio is underwritten by Sarah Sonk, the real estate agent who loves modernist houses just as much as you do. 919-601-7339. And my modboxusa.com. And their swanky, colorful, mid-century modern mailboxes, including a new model that attaches to your house, just like Grandma's. Thanks for listening. I'm George Smart with Frank King. Take us out, Tom.
Sure. Visit US Modernist Radio on the web at usmodernistradio.org for links about people and buildings mentioned today on the show. We record at Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl. You can email us at comments@usmodernistradio.org. US Modernist Radio is a production of North Carolina Modernist Houses, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. George and Frank and I will be back in 2 weeks with another carbohydrate-free, organic, low-sodium, vitamin-enriched, straight-from-the-barn, free-range edition of US Modernist Radio.